Thank you for joining us on this Thursday edition, this May 9th transmission. We're into the second hour now. Judge orders conspiracy re-education for Lauryn Hill. Singer told to undergo counseling over conspiracy theory that music industry strangles real talent. That's an actual quote, and they're now coming out in places like Psychology Today saying that I'm insane for believing in a new world order. They also have been saying now for 8 months that Benghazi, being prior knowledge, and a stand-down is a conspiracy theory. And you can pull up articles where in the British press they're calling for the arrest of climate deniers. First it was global warming was happening. Now that the Earth has stopped heating and cooling, they're just saying if you deny anything they say, even if it changes day to day, you're mentally ill and have to disappear off into a gulag. We're going to get into Benghazi Gate. We now confirmed what we already knew 8 months ago here on the air with our guest. Dr. Steve Pachenik, formerly of the State Department psychological warfare head, will join us in the last 30 minutes of the transmission. He said his intel was the ambassador, who was an Arabist, a Christian, trained generationally for 200 years to go into the Muslim world and proselytize. That's who they hired at the State Department. He came from a long line of Arabists, and he was in there, and he did not want to transfer missiles to al-Qaeda to be used against Syria. Heat-seeking missiles. That there was a double stand-down. That's why they fired like 10 members of CENTCOM, including the head of CENTCOM. Made them stand down. Because they were so angry, they followed orders and sat there for first it was 2 hours, then 6, some estimates 8 hours they stood down. Days before they begged for support. And now it's all out. It's all out. And we're going to go to Tom, Jacob, Ship, James, Mark. We'll get to all of you on your calls on Benghazi in about 30 minutes when Lord Monckton leaves us. Then for 5 minutes, we've got a guest popping in who invented the 3D printable gun that they're trying to ban all over the country. Talk about revolutionary. Technology cuts both ways, against the establishment and for it. I know that the good guys can become the establishment, and we've got to get used to winning. My dad, who's been a successful person in science and in business and in so many other things, always told me, he said, son, anybody can be successful if you've got decent intelligence and are willing to work hard. You can be successful at basically anything you want to be successful at, but you can't be successful at everything. You got to pick the things you really have a passion for, and you can be successful in it. And he said something else. He goes, losers would rather steal $1 from you than make $1 million with you, because they get off on it. They think that's winning. And the only thing in this world that has any value is your word, and that you be an honorable person. And he went on to say, so many people he'd seen with high IQs, as soon as they started having real success, self-destructed themselves. And I have watched that so many times. People see it as selling out. If we, libertarian constitutionalists, 1776 worldwide as I call it, the ideas of the Magna Carta, through the Bill of Rights and Constitution, if we breathe life into that, we're going to have victory. And then as we have victory, people have to believe we can have more success. UKIP, and that's why Lord Monckton joins us. We'll get into the latest carbon taxes, Benghazi Gate, all of it with him. Lord Monckton, of course, served with Margaret Thatcher, who, of course, passed recently. People can bash her, say she was a globalist all day. I've talked to the Jim Tucker, who just died, who knew her. She helped shoot down Bilderberg, totally taking over UK sovereignty and holding up the New World Order 30 years. And they hated her and did dirty tricks. I'm not saying she's perfect, but people that I really respected said she was the real deal. It's like Reagan. He wasn't perfect. He got steered some wrong directions, but he said the 9 most scary words are, I'm from the government, I'm here to help you. Look at Reagan compared to Obama. Look at how far they've taken us. Look at what they get away with now. And so you can talk about her passing. He was good friends with her and her top advisor in science and technology and the press. And, of course, his father was the Lord of Monckton and Brenchley, and they've now basically turned the House of Lords into a debating club. And people say, well, aren't you for that? Well, I'm for, separation of powers. I don't like the fact that they're spying on the parliament and the bureaucracy stealing all the power and transferring it to the euro, but I tend to digress. The point is, Lord Monckton joins us to talk about all of this, and UKIP just had devastating victories in the elections in the UK, the local elections. They're having victories, and their idea of sovereignty is having huge victories in the EU Parliament. Even though it's ceremonial, The bully pulpit is bringing the bureaucrats who are exempt from taxes to their knees. So that's basically, for stations that just joined us, why I want to get Moncton on to hurriedly go over all these topics. But the fact that UKIP, coming from nowhere, founded by Lord Moncton and Mr. Bloom, who's coming on at the start of the next hour, Godfrey Bloom, and Nigel Farage, in a pub years ago, as just businessmen that didn't want to be EU slaves, and has Labour and the Tories apologizing and shaking in fear after demonizing UKIP. This is the example and the blueprint of worldwide victory that Lord Moncton has talked about so much. So I salute UKIP's victory, sir, and I've been ranting the last 5 minutes on a host of a flotilla of subjects. What would you like to tackle first, Lord Moncton?
Well, let's begin with that extraordinary victory in the local authority elections here in England and Wales, where the United Kingdom Independence Party, which had polled 3% of the national vote at the last general election, polled 25% of the national vote this time. An astonishing increase in just a few years. And I think the reason for this, really, is that people are now waking up to the fact that all the points you've just mentioned, they've been talking nonsense about the climate for years, they've been centralizing power in the hands of unelected people in the European dictatorship for years, and the people are no longer willing to stand for any more of this. The euro, the Mickey Mouse monopoly money currency of the European dictatorship, has collapsed and collapsed again. The European emissions trading scheme has collapsed now for the 6th or 7th time. I've lost count of how many times it's collapsed just this last week. The price of the right to emit a ton of carbon dioxide for the big businesses that have to pay it is now only $1 or $2 a ton, and the commissars have now realized that they are not going to be allowed to rig that particular market anymore to try and force the price artificially up. And that effectively means that the global warming scare is now over as well. And the reason why people have been turning to the United Kingdom Independence Party in such very large numbers, Alex, is simply that we have been right on all these things all along, you and I and UKIP. And we have said that people won't stand for having their democracy taken away. They won't stand for having Magna Carta in this side of the Atlantic and the Constitution at your side of it torn up. They won't stand for the national bankruptcy, which is being caused by massive over-borrowing, both in the United States and in the United Kingdom and in many countries of Europe. They won't stand for any more of this climate nonsense. We now want to get our governing class either to face reality or go and be replaced by a new governing class consisting of people who actually know what they're doing.
What would Margaret Thatcher, if she was still in her prime, be doing right now if she was seeing all this open authoritarianism going on? Benghazi Gate, Obama has Democrats all over the news saying your children belong to the state. It has reached a ultra theater of the absurd.
And that, I think, is what is so useful. Margaret Thatcher would have left the European Union in the 1990s if she had still been Prime Minister. She was already working on that when she left office in 1990. And she would have been very determined to see the back of the European Union because it isn't democratic and because it takes away national sovereignty and doesn't transfer it to elected hands elsewhere, but to unelected hands elsewhere. She was very conscious of the problem that as you transfer wealth and power from elected hands in those countries still lucky enough to have them, which doesn't include Britain, unfortunately, to foreign institutions, whether they be supranational like the EU or global like the UN, then you're always transferring powers to unelected organizations. So power passes from elected to unelected hands. Now, this, she always realized, was a danger to the very idea of democracy, which we acquired after 1,000 painful years of constitutional history, and which you took for yourselves in a few glorious years in the 1770s. And so she saw this threat and she would have opposed it. She also, of course, was paying back the national debt. We were running, by the end of her term of office, a very substantial national surplus. In fact, we paid off half of the entire 250-year accumulated national debt of the United Kingdom when she left office. And the very next Prime Minister that came in threw that precious financial advantage away. And so she would have been exercising tight fiscal and monetary discipline. She would be making sure we were not printing money. Do you know that Obama is now printing via the Fed $1 trillion without any backing at all every year? That's the latest figure I've just had. It's called QE3.
And the inflation, and the inflation, no matter what they say in the press, is devastating. The prices are just exploding everywhere.
Well, and they're bound to, because, of course, if you've got 5 beans and $5, then $1 is 1 bean. But if you've got 5 beans and $10, then each bean is going to be $2. That's inflation. It's not funny. And that's what they're creating, and I think now creating it deliberately. It's not just a matter of buying time in the hope that some cheap fix will be found. I think they're doing it deliberately to destroy the U.S. economy. And we've seen this all before. It's happened time and time again in U.S. history, actually, with this.
No, that's Cloward and Piven. That's Cloward and Piven. We'll talk about that when we come back. They're on record saying, we will bankrupt you, we will shut your industry down, and we will make you go on welfare and make you love the government. This is the collectivization. I want to talk about the Benghazi gate with you and get your take on that, because I know you've been following it closely. I want to go to the latest carbon taxes. Prince Charles saying we're not paying enough. Many anthropologists and archaeologists believe that before man even discovered the power to harness and use fire, we were involved in agrarian activities. That is, taking the seeds of plants and then replanting them to produce more. The very foundation of our modern civilization and human culture is centered around the planting and cultivation of edible plants, fruits, vegetables, nuts, you name it. And the globalists have been going after gardening. They've been harassing people that have gardens in their front yards or their backyards. They've called for licenses for people to have gardens because you can't trust prisoners in the police state America to be able to grow their own food. That's why I've come to the realization that we need to become self-sufficient. You need to be informed. You need to have the Second Amendment to protect yourself. You need to be politically active to wake up others. You need to filter your water. But you also need to plant a garden. Even if you live in an apartment, you can do this. If you live in the countryside, obviously you can do it on a grand scale. There are so many green belts in areas that humans don't even visit, nearby cities and in suburbs, where people are now more and more planting their own little private gardens and meadows and off the side of the road. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a revolutionary act to unplug from the television, to unplug from the computer and all the globalist propaganda, and to go out in your backyard or your front yard or planters at your apartment or on the roof of the building where you live, and to plant a garden.
Here are some of the amazing deals at InfoWars Seed Center at InfoWarsShop.com. The Survival Seed Vault by My Patriot Supply features only the finest survival heirloom seeds for a robust and hardy garden, even in the toughest of times. The ARC All-in-One Seed Kit contains 70 varieties of 50,000 seeds of fruits, vegetables, medicinal, and culinary herbs. All ARC seeds are heirloom. Each type is labeled and sealed separately for ease of use and longevity. The Deluxe Emergency Seed Bank combines 3 of Emergency Seed Bank's top sellers: the Family Survival Emergency Seed Bank, the Medicinal Herb Seeds Pack, and the Culinary Herb Seeds Pack. We also have starter varieties of the deluxe seed packages for fruit, salad, salsa, peppers, and medicinal herbs and more. Go to the InfoWars Seed Center at InfoWarsShop.com.
A little seed can grow a huge tree that produces fruit for up to 50 years. We have the best life bombs. That's what these are. We have the best weapons against death out there at the lowest prices, waiting for you to lovingly plant them and lovingly grow them and lovingly eat them and share them with others. We will strike back against the New World Order, and this is only one more initiative in our fight against them. So please join us at InfoWarsShop.com, or you can link through at Infowars.com at the InfoWars Seed Center. scienceandpublicpolicy.org is Lord Christopher Monckton's very powerful website exposing the incredible fraud of the UN, the carbon taxes, all of it. It is the best website out there for all the scientific documentation and well-written articles. And you've got Mark Moreno with probably the best news site out there, the Climate Depot. And you got the best overall news juggernaut, able to force stories out into the mainstream, drudgereport.com. And then you have the factory of hardcore resistance, Infowars.com, PrisonPlanet.com, and PrisonPlanet.tv. Lord Monckton, this is your short segment. We got the next segment. I'll let you get out of here because I know you're busy. But I wanted to, you're a historian as well as an inventor and a scientist. I wanted to ask you this. There are periods in history, as you know, where more happens in a year than happened in the previous 20. And there are some periods in history in these trends where more happens in a year than happens in the last 100 in real developments. Now, with technology advancing, the singularity down the road, all of this, things are obviously accelerated. But we now have the spectacle of government corruption and corporate corruption and collectivist cronyism and crony capitalism naked, but they're just more brazen, more arrogant, operating criminally now in plain view, militarizing against us, and then getting caught. I've talked to top people. They killed the ambassador because he didn't want to give missiles to Al-Qaeda. What is going on with collectivists? What is going on with Obama? What is going on with the staged Arab Spring? Why put radical Muslims in everywhere? Why do all this? Because I know at UKIP you study this. What is happening historically? Because stuff has gotten so absurdist, I don't even know what to say anymore. Is it that the ruling class is smoking their own dope and has lost total control?
They have lost control. The ruling class is no longer a ruling class, properly speaking, at all. And they've lost control for two main reasons. One is that they've run out of other people's money. And the other is that they think like a hive mind. So once the party line is dictated to them, they will accept that and parrot it. They've been doing this on the EU here in the UK for the last 30 years. Now people are just kicking against it and not buying it anymore. But for 30 years they got away with it. They've been doing the same on climate change. They're doing the same on what we need is more international socialism, more power for the UN, et cetera, less power for individual nation states. And in particular, there is a very vicious anti-Western hatred in the thinking of the hard left, which forms this terrible hive mind, this dangerous consensus, as they like to call it, this party line, which they trot out. And the problem now is that the left have got control of the media. They've got control of course, Congress at the moment. They've got control of the White House. And this means that they can now, they think, do more or less anything. The problem is this, that the money has run out, and they are really, really scared, because they know that the state can only function if it can pay its way. And okay, you can pay your way by earning it, you can pay your way for a time by borrowing it. But what happens when people realize that they're never going to get paid back? And that's where the U.S. economy now is. You see, you've got debts, as of the last count, of 17 trillion. I think it was 4 trillion under George Bush. It's 17 trillion now, and rising at a rate of $1 million.
Obama has spent more money than George W. Bush all the way back to George Washington in 4 years.
That's right, and it's getting worse, because they're now in that terrible inflationary spiral where, because they've borrowed so much in the past and they're borrowing so much more on top, the interest payments are now so large that whatever else you do, you've got to pay those or nobody will lend you any more money. And so they're having to start thinking about making cuts. And of course, the socialists don't like to make cuts. They don't like to count how many beans make 5. And now they're faced with the reality of having to do this. They're realizing that this is really electorally very unpopular. Obama's strategy during the first 4 years was he reckoned he could just about get away with it by going on printing and borrowing, which he did. Now, he can't go on getting away with it for very much longer. The Chinese, who are the lenders of last resort at the moment, are beginning to worry about whether they'll ever get paid back. And they will eventually decide, look, we can afford to cut our losses on the States by not lending them any more money. Because the Chinese are not worried actually about seeing the United States survive because they're a major customer. They're worried about the United States competing with them for natural resources. That's what matters to the Chinese. Then you look at the Arab world, where, as you say, very strange things went on.
It's amazing. The more a society's in decline, the more the government worships itself with big aircraft and royal uniforms and festooning themselves with red carpets. But then it's been hundreds of years since these politicians actually went on the front lines to lead a war. They send our boys off to do it. Final segment with Lord Monckton. Lord Monckton, what concerns you in the future? I know during the break you were telling me about a new article you've written at scienceandpublicpolicy.org. We need to post it at Infowars.com. What are the dangers, but what are also the silver linings? What is the course out of, because I said what you just said last segment in the first hour, government and corrupt elements of it have never been more exposed, but that makes them more dangerous than ever because they are on the edge of losing power. They are on the edge of a major sea change, a new renaissance in my summation. Correct me if you think I'm historically wrong, but that is the great crossroad that we're now at. So what are the main threats, and then what are the main avenues out of this impending dark age they want to bring us into?
Right. The first thing is the main threat immediately to the United States is that you're running out of money. The government is broke, and not just broke, it's in negative territory at a very serious degree. This is now a serious problem. The dollar is already beginning to lose its status as the world's reserve currency. Now, that matters a lot because while it served as a reserve currency, it meant that foreign countries had large holdings of dollars, which effectively meant that you could print money against their holdings and pay yourselves more money even if you hadn't earned it. But that is now about to stop. And already secret meetings are being held between other major countries such as China, France, the United Kingdom, Germany, and various others about replacing the dollar with a different currency. The International Monetary Fund, which nobody elects, is proposing that its own currency, what's called the special drawing right, should become the new reserve currency. Of course, that would be no better than the dollar, frankly, because that too is in negative territory. But it's clear that the reign of the dollar as the mighty dollar, which everybody uses for their financial transactions, is already over. I'm going to give you one tiny indication of this, and that is that between China and Korea, there is now an agreement that they will no longer use the dollar to denominate international contracts between the two countries. Instead, they will use either the Chinese yuan, which is the foreign version of their currency, or they will use the Korean won. And this is the first of many such bilateral and eventually multilateral deals that are now in prospect and being done to dethrone the dollar, not because everybody hates the dollar, but because they fear that it's not worth anything anymore. Because there's too much of it being printed, not enough being done to back it up, no work being done, government hugely overspending, no attempt by Obama to rein in the spending. Everything is out of control. And the fear is that very suddenly, this can happen very suddenly, once the dollar loses its status as the global reserve currency, then you will get inflation like you've never seen. And it will happen more or less overnight. And so what I'm saying to people now is buy silver coins and buy them quick and keep them hidden, because you're going to need them when there isn't any longer a paper currency.
And that's why they're in a war against gold and silver, because it exposes that. You hit something last segment I want you to elaborate on. Then I want to hit some of the latest climate news and let you go because you're busy. You talked about in the so-called left, who are really just authoritarians, Because, again, I'm not even a right-winger. I'm just a constitutionalist who wants common sense freedom. You can call it whatever you want. On many issues, I'd be called, you know, a liberal 200 years ago. So these terms don't really mean much. They call themselves liberals. That's really a political cover. But you talked about their hate of the West, their hate of masculinity, even though they're mainly men, their hatred of anything pure because it threatens their criminal instinct. And that's from my study, and here's my question, is so key because you're absolutely right, obviously. Sure, you could say Obama's really CIA and he's playing the part of the left and they're going to organize things and they wouldn't kill the dollar. They wouldn't do this to America. But the truth is they have such a core hatred of this republic that they do want to see it burn, kind of like a criminal wants to be caught. And this is something we see in psychology and criminology. These are self-destructive lunatics. Even though they're in control, they hate those of us that live in the West so much, they want to burn it down. Lord Monckton.
Well, there is, I'm afraid, an element of very strong hatred of the West and of Christianity and of freedom and democracy and prosperity and capitalism and free markets, stock markets. They hate all of that because it was successful, and these losers don't like to see anybody else succeeding, so they want everybody to be losers too. That's their solution to things. And you see this even in little ways. For instance, for a time, as you know, because I did this on a previous show with you, our appalling Prime Minister, David Cameron, who is going to go down as one of the worst Prime Ministers in British history, and also one of the shortest lived, I think, he tried to ban the wearing of Christian symbols such as crucifixes in public places. And, of course, you know, I went out and I was given by one of the people who came to my talks in San Diego a very nice St. Benedict's cross, which I've been wearing. And I wore it around London in Clubland, and the eyebrows were going up all over the place. What's he doing wearing a crucifix? And I would tell them, I'd say, it's because Cameron's trying to ban them.
And this is, and by the way, this is a global initiative.
This is not going to be allowed. And so I stopped him doing it, and not only I, but others stopped him doing it. But you see, there is this hatred of Christianity. He wasn't going to ban wearing of a Sikh turban or a Muslim burqa. Oh, no, no, no. Only the Christian symbols, only the symbols of the national religion of these islands. That's what he was going to attack. And there's this extraordinary self-destructiveness that goes right through our political class, and they hate the West, and they feel guilty about the time of colonial expansion. They feel guilty about the British Empire. They feel guilty about capitalism being successful. They feel guilty that we are not poor and other countries are. And they then manufacture this guilt about the climate as well, to try and say we've got to beat our breasts and shut down our industries to save the planet. The planet was triumphantly saved 2,000 years ago. It doesn't need saving again. But that's their slogan. We want to shut everything down. We want to shut the West down. And Obama is doing it in the simplest and most straightforward way possible, which is to borrow beyond all capacity of the United States to repay, to topple the dollar from its perch as the world's reserve currency. It used to be the British pound. We made the same mistake with hardline Moscow socialists in 1967, when eventually they had to devalue the pound, and that meant that the pound immediately ceased to be the world's reserve currency. The dollar replaced it. The dollar is now going down to policies exactly the same as the policies that our Communist Labour Party followed over here. And he is doing it quite deliberately, I think. He's doing it knowing the destruction he's going to cause. He doesn't care. He absolutely hates not just Britain, where he removed Churchill's bust from the White House as his first public act. He hates America too, and one should never misunderstand that. He loathes America, and he will destroy it if he can. And unfortunately, the electorate has given him a second chance.
And by the way, that's because any group trying to conquer wants to overthrow whatever the old power structure was. And I certainly don't romanticize older segments of the power structure in England or the U.S., but compared to these people, they were angels. And these people see anyone who's independent as a threat to their monopoly, like Kim Jong-un of North Korea, and it's that criminal instinct that drives them. And did you know they're telling Christians they can't talk about Christ or wear a Christian symbol if they're in the military? They are taking degrees from valedictorians in their own commencement speeches if they say they owe things to God when there's no law. The First Amendment says the government can't block you from religion, not that you can't in your own speech say you give the glory to Jesus Christ. I mean, why, in closing, and then we're going to let you go, Lord Monckton, why are they so diametrically opposed to Christianity across the board? I mean, they came out recently and taught the Pentagon, this is Fox News, that all Catholics are, quote, extremist next to Al-Qaeda. Show the Fox News headline, guys. And that all evangelicals. I mean, what is this? This is so absurdist. They're obviously the bad guys. They're obviously communists.
Exactly what it is. I'll tell you exactly what it is. If you subscribe either to the Catholic Church or to any of the evangelical churches that are similar, they not only give you a body of belief which is independent of any socialist or communist or fascist group, but they also give you a personal relationship with Almighty God. And that means that you think independently for yourself. And that's the one thing they cannot, the hive mind cannot stand that. It cannot stand the thought that there are people who have independent thoughts, who say, we want to be Christians, we don't want to belong to the European Union, we don't want to have any of this climate nonsense rammed down our throats. We want to be free, democratic, prosperous people. They don't want people thinking for themselves. That's what it's really about. It's about total control. The totalitarians, this is the word that describes them. The Chinese, in early imperial China, used to call them the legalists. These are the people who we would call them now control freaks. They want to control everything and everybody down to the last miserable flickering poison-filled light bulb that you can or can't have in your house. Whether you can afford to turn it on or not is another matter. They want to control every aspect of our lives. They will not allow us to just get on with it ourselves. We have to be regulated and taxed to death. That is their sole shoddy ambition. It's an extraordinary nihilistic, destructive ambition. These are people who cannot create anything themselves. All they want to do is destroy what others have created.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Tearing things down. That's their main motive, absolute destruction. They'll do it from within by subversion. They'll do it by commanding the government and the media. The media look the other way while Obama trashes the U.S. economy. The greatest economy the world has ever seen is now being brought low by one man in the White House who is not being held to account by the media, except for people like you, Alex. If it weren't for people like you, then it would have been all over by now. But
well, you too, Lord Monckton.
Some voices, while you're still allowed to broadcast.
Absolutely. People better appreciate. People better appreciate scienceandpublicpolicy.org. They better know about Cloward and Piven's strategy to bring us down. They better appreciate drudgereport.com, Infowars.com. They better appreciate WorldNet Daily. They better appreciate the few groups out there because we're having a great effect and others need to join us. And what shocks me, Lord Monckton, in closing, is you're saying all this stuff and it's all true. I mean, they say they want a post-industrial world. They say they hate fathers. Every show on TV pulls down fathers. This is a group of deviant scum, and I declare that I am free of them. And everyone else, we need to perform a mass exorcism on the West over the New World Order. These people are pit of hell demons. Lord Monckton, we'll talk to you again soon. Congratulations on sweeping to victory in the UK.
Well, God bless you, Alex. And what we're going to need to do now is to form our own international party of freedom to make sure that we fight back against this before it's too late.
Let's get you on the next month because I want to plan. You've talked about this for years. It's starting to happen. It's time for Ron Paul to get involved and help lead it with you guys. It is time to put out our global manifesto against tyranny as a clear choice and get on the offense. Thank you, Lord Monckton.
Thank you. God bless America.
All right, there he goes, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, we either get on the march or it's over, okay? We either take action or it's over. Ask yourselves, what are you doing in this time of great challenge? What are you doing to unlock minds?